Irish guy, old stories hit high, tells of struggle and strife. Keep your head in the fight. Broken bones in the street, ain't no place for the weak. From the land of the brave, where the words cut deep. Coming next on the air now, feel the despair. Generation X, shout out, shouting somewhere. Rising up from the dark with a fire and spark. Rage and passion combined to leave a lasting mark. Coming next, shouting loud, voices from the crowd. Through the mist of...
Welcome to Common X. One thing we've noticed lately is that people feel overwhelmed by information, but strangely under-equipped to make sense of it. We have more access to knowledge than any generation in history, and yet more confusion about truth, meaning, and even identity. Today's conversation isn't about politics or hot takes. It's about something deeper, how philosophy, faith, power, and technology shape the way we think and who we're becoming. Dr. Owen Anderson has spent his career at the intersection of philosophy, religion, and public life, so we're grateful to have him here to slow this down with us. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
I'm glad to be with you. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
So, Dr. Owen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a philosophy and religion professor at Arizona State University. I've been there 25 years. And I am involved in all the standard philosophy questions. That's why I went into philosophy. I love asking questions about what is real and what is good. How do we know anything at all? And that naturally led to studying religion, because a lot of times religion is the place where you get those questions answered. But I'm also been involved in some public intellectual work, like opposing censorship at universities. And the way that I've seen that happen is, I usually post or put it about 2018. Around 2018, I saw that any attempt to remain neutral among professors, and when I speak about professors, I'm usually speaking about humanities professors, so people in subjects like philosophy, religion, history, literature, English, all the classes that people have to take to get to their other degrees. Like if you're an engineering student, you got to take 2 or 3 of these humanities classes. I saw all restraint thrown off, and attempts to be neutral, and just full bore into very radical leftist political movements, and using the university to further those goals. So I already knew, everyone knew going into university that it's a literal place. No one sends their kids to university to become more conservative. But there was still always an attempt to say, hey, we're just doing multiculturalism. We're just teaching all the different viewpoints. We're not taking a position. And the gloves were off in 2018. So I began to speak up and just say, hey, this is, whatever your personal views are, start a podcast, start a blog, but we can't use state resources, because we're a state-funded university, for these purposes. And it kind of came to a head a couple years ago when they asked me to take a required DEI employee training. And the the training was called Inclusive Communities, which sounds great. Each of the words in DEI is a great word. So no one ever names their political movement something bad, right? They always use positive words. But as I got into this training, this online training, I saw that it was about racial essentialism, meaning that you can judge a group of people, in this case white people, based on their skin color without ever knowing anything about the individual you're speaking about. Just they're part of the problem, they're part of whiteness. And so I objected to it, and currently still involved in the lawsuit against Arizona State University over that training. I could tell you more details about that, but that's kind of the summary of where I'm at and what I do in my public speaking. Now, the thing for me is that as a philosopher, I want to question every viewpoint out there. So the problem for me is not that we would question conservative ideas. I tend to be more on the conservative side of the spectrum. But the problem for me is when you say you can't question some ideas. And if you do question those, you're a morally suspicious person. We can no longer hang out with you because you questioned the ideology. To me, that's just old-fashioned censorship. And as long as that reigns at our universities, we're not really doing education anymore.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, because my last job that I had, a big corporation, we had to do that HR training too, and it was very DEI, and talked about white bias, and when you get done with it, I'm just like, wow, I guess I am the problem.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
But I'm not, right? I'm inclusive. It seems like, do you think like we've gone too far the other way in kind of implementing this, not just only in colleges, but our corporate culture as well?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think that's a common way to describe problems is like you've overcorrected to one far side. But that means we would look back at like the 80s and we would say, oh, this is at the 80s, we have the problem that we're overcorrecting. But I don't think we see such an issue. I think what we see is the better analogy is take. Give them an inch, they'll take a mile. So in other words, in the 80s, we start affirmative action. And we're going to hire people based on external properties, not based on character or abilities. And that was, accepted. People went along with it. And so it's just a ratcheting up to a point where it goes from the 80s and just a general claim about fairness. Hey, we want to be fair and we want to make workplaces look like our communities. And so in order to do that, we're going to have quotas, to a point where we're saying what you just described. Actually, people with this skin color are bad people. And we want to hire fewer of them and more of the other people that we've decided are good people.
Yeah. So I think, like philosophy and modern culture, are we teaching people how to think?
Well, I think, there's a little bit of ambiguity. People say, I don't want to learn what to think. I want to learn how to think. But even then, the DEI crowd will say, well, you're just teaching logocentrism, which is a Eurocentric model of rationality. And that's where you'll get news stories about math professors teaching that 2 plus 2 isn't always 4, depending on your culture. And so part of the problem is exactly what is thinking at all? And how do we do it? Not in the sense of like a normative, you need to think like the Europeans, but what is it? Is it something that we all have in common? Because that was really what I think one of the characteristics of the modern age is to look for what is universal among all of us rather than what is partisan and divisive. So the Europeans emerged from the wars of religion between Protestants and Catholic nations, and they said, okay, what is there actually in common between us, the philosophers of the modern age? What do we all have in common? And I think things like logic is a standard answer to that. Our ability to think and reason together, even though we have lots of other things that are different, because just the three of us, we could come up with a big list of things that are really different about us that we couldn't get along over if we wanted to, or we could look to what we share in common. So I think, as a professor who teaches logic, I've said all 25 years I've been teaching this stuff, this needs to be a required class. Every student needs to take logic. And for a little while, there were a few majors, like nursing students had to take my logic class. Not mine, but logic. And I always thought that was great. But it's changed now. I don't really see, usually when we offer a logic class, we don't get a lot of students. And that's really sad, I think.
Yeah, that kind of leads into my next question. It's like philosophy used to train minds. Now it feels like it's been kind of sidelined. Is that, do you think, intentional?
Yeah,
I
guess
and not learned.
I think so. I mean, as part of there's different levels of censorship. The one that I'm speaking up about is very overt. We're using resources to advance Ibram X. Kendi's anti-racism agenda. So there it is. That's what they'll say. So you can't miss that. But leading up to it, there's a ton of more covert ways that are based on social pressures. And so one of them would just be the assumption, just for a quick way to phrase it, I would say the Marxist oppressor-oppressed dialectic. And in other words, you're not taught, hey, this is Marxism, but you're taught that the whole world is divided up into two groups, the oppressors and the oppressed, and you can identify those groups based on skin color. And then when you get to the oppressed, they really can't do anything wrong. And if they do something wrong, let's say they steal government money for daycares, well, the oppressors forced them to do that. So even then, it's still the oppressor's fault.
Right, it's not their fault.
So then you force them to do that. And so then you have this umbrella ideology, and all of philosophy is only allowed to happen underneath this oppressor-oppressed dialectic, and you're not allowed to question it, or else you're pigeonholed as, so you're for the oppressors. That's what you're telling me? And so, no, professors aren't the bravest group. They don't want to be that guy who questioned that and is then pigeonholed. And so they'll just go along with it because they want to get tenure, they want to get published, they want to get an award for their teaching. They don't want to actually be the guy who says, wait a minute, They don't actually want to be Socrates, which is interesting since philosophy professors should say, sign me up, I'm Socrates.
Right. Isn't that kind of what philosophy is about?
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
people talk about my truth, then, right?
Yeah.
Versus the truth, it feels like philosophy has quietly slipped out of the conversation in a way.
Yeah,
Would you agree with
it's
that?
kind of led the way by being converted to this oppressor-oppressed dialectic. Because you're right, this phrase, I tell my students this in Logic or Philosophy 101, you don't have to say my truth. You just have to say I believe. That's what the word I believe means. You don't have to add on, and also it's my truth. No, we all understand. You think this is true, you believe it, and that's where my class begins. Because a whole bunch of your beliefs, maybe most of them, are false. And so it doesn't help to say, well, it's my truth. Well, I mean, if we really follow that line of reasoning out, all education ends. So the fifth grader gets back his math test and it has a bunch of things marked off as wrong, and he just tells his teacher, "No, but those were my truths." And when the teacher has to concede, "Yeah, you're right. Those are your truths. Good job, Timmy."
Right. Good job. 2 + 2 is 12. You did it, buddy. Right.
Yeah, the
on.
whole point of math, the whole point of any subject, is the teacher knows things you don't know, and is going to try to get their information into your head with different pedagogical ways. Some of it's lecture, some of it's dialogue, some of it might be group projects, whatever the way is. Not, you already came in knowing everything. Then what are we doing here? Right?
Yeah. Do you think philosophy has been replaced then, or deliberately sidelined in that way?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of what I'm describing happening in philosophy. In fact, even though the oppressor-oppressed dialectic is called critical theory, and it emerged in European thought after World War II, essentially to answer this question. It was communist intellectuals, and they were persecuted by the Nazis. The Nazis in Germany hated the German communists, and so the United States helped a number of these intellectuals leave Germany and come here. And we put them as professors in our universities at places like Berkeley. So when you study the 60s Cultural Revolution, it almost always traces to one of these communist intellectuals. And they called it critical theory because they're trying to figure out, how do we critically take apart American culture to rebuild it as a communist culture? But that word critical isn't actually critical, because you're not allowed to question the communist assumptions. You're not allowed to question the dialectic. Because if you're, say, a conservative, you could be an atheist conservative, you might be a Christian conservative, you're part of the oppressor that needs to be replaced. So what we're seeing, I think it's become very well known. People have been talking about critical theory in the conservative circles, and so we're aware, okay, this is the reigning orthodoxy, and perhaps we can now replace it and get back to real critical thinking. But as long as that's there, as long as that rules the universities, we really won't see any kind of open thought and open questioning.
Yeah. So
Do you think
if
that has a
philosophy-
direct...
Go ahead, Ian.
Go ahead, Jared. No, go ahead, man.
I was just going to say, so if philosophy shapes how we reason, then free speech determines whether those ideas are even allowed to surface. So can truth survive without open disagreement?
Well, I think that's the beauty of the American project, why I love it, why I do work on the First Amendment. I'm one of the editors for the Cambridge Companion to the First Amendment, because the First Amendment, whether it's for press or the right to assemble, or the two better known ones, speech and religion, you take that away, what's left? And so I think free debate can be scary, because it does involve people questioning things that you might hold as above question. But as a philosopher, I take that as a challenge. If there's something I think is so true that it should just be obvious to everyone, then I should be able to prove that in public debate. And if I can't, then maybe what I think is so obvious really isn't obvious to people. But also, free debate isn't screaming or hurling bottles. Free debate is free debate. You have a belief, you come into the public square, you say your belief and you give your argument, and an opponent gets to now explain why they think you're wrong, and you can go back and forth. But most of what we see as free debate since the 60s Cultural Revolution has just turned into rioting. And so a group of people will show up downtown, and they'll have signs, and they'll protest. And so advocating and protesting are free speech. Now, I'm not suggesting they're not. I don't want the government to change that. But those aren't places where anyone debates anything. And what I want to see, and what I've challenged ASU professors on, is I've said, hey, I'll debate any one of you who thinks I'm wrong about what I'm saying about conservative principles and free speech. And it'll be really good for our students. And let me give an example. A couple years ago, one of the things that made me become more outspoken was that TPUSA was going to have an event at ASU with Charlie Kirk and Dennis Prager and Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be held at our honors college. And the honors professors, the vast majority of them, wrote a letter protesting it being at their college because they said those three guys are white nationalist bigots. So you got a Jewish guy and a Japanese American guy,
Right.
White nationalist bigots. And it just blew my mind because those are very, unfortunately Charlie's gone now, but the other two are very standard conservatives, and Charlie was too. They're not like Nick Fuentes or something. And so if they can't speak at ASU, what conservative can ever speak at ASU? And not only that, they're not allowed to speak because some professors decided they're white nationalist bigots. So they were successful. They weren't allowed to speak at the honors college. They were allowed to speak at ASU. Mm-hmm. But they successfully removed it from the honors college. So what that communicated to honor students is there are some ideas out there, and it's the ideas held by these three guys, that are so dangerous. You need your professor parent to step in and protect your fragile ears from hearing them speak. And just for everyone to know what they talked about at the event, Charlie Kirk got up there and talked about why you should keep the Sabbath. Dennis Prager talked about how to achieve happiness through honoring your parents. And Robert Kiyosaki talked about how much he likes gold compared to the American dollar. Those are the ideas that were too dangerous for ASU Honors College students to hear.
Yeah, and I think, you pointed out, Charlie Kirk, and what's interesting to me is, like, whether you agreed with him or not, he was really good at debate. And I think, him showing up at campuses and debating people that wanted to debate, like, I've seen quite a few videos of
he's
him,
all
right?
over.
And, like, it honestly turned into a shouting match of, people on the other side trying to, hammer in their viewpoint on him. And I've said this quite a few times, but if I ever run for school superintendent of Washington, I'm going to make debate a required class in junior and senior year, because it'll teach our children how to have that civil discourse, right? Because like you said, it's just, I think that ability is pretty much gone out of American society. And it's just, like you said, extreme viewpoints one way or the other way. And we're getting more divided when we
can't even talk to each other
more together, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think some of that
on
feels
issues that I think are trivial.
So they're well. That I'm gonna bracket this and come back to this in a minute, because I think some of that is psyops. But
I agree.
Before we go there, I want to continue on this theme, because I made this exact point we had a big memorial for Charlie Kirk at ASU, and when I spoke at it, I made the point that he was our Socrates, meaning whether you liked him or not. I said to the professors, whether you maybe didn't like him at all, your students loved him. And I don't mean your conservative students. I mean your liberal students. They loved to go debate Charlie Kirk and post on their Instagram a selfie and say something like, oh, I just owned Charlie Kirk. Whether or not they did doesn't matter. They loved the fact that someone on campus would just debate them. And you'll see there, at our TPUSA club at ASU, we have Democrat students show up, and the reason they give is, I just want to have some debate. Like, I can't debate in my classes anymore, and I know you guys respect debate, so I'm here to do that. And that, you're right, that's what's sad. We needed someone like that to remind us. And what he did was he questioned the reigning orthodoxy. And the one that really stands out in people's minds is he questioned LGBTQ sex philosophy. And so that's what the Barrett Honors College professor said is, besides them being white nationalist bigots, they attack LGBTQ students. Now, I don't think Robert Kiyosaki cares about that one way or the other, but Dennis Prager and Charlie Kirk, they're conservative in their sexual morality, but the word attack is provocative, because neither one of them chases down students and tackles them and punches them. They just mean they offer an argument about why that lifestyle could bring harm to you. And again, the professors as parents stepped in and said, you're so fragile, you can't even hear a conservative Christian or a conservative Jew give an argument about sexual morality. And so, that's really sad that we can't have those kind of debates on campus.
What do you think the loss of open disagreement does to a person psychologically.
Well, I think it creates this conformity culture where your biggest worry is being in the group and not standing out. Now, I think that's why I said before we started recording that the three of us hear the word conformity and we cringe, because that's what everything a Gen Xer is against. We don't want to be conforming. And so if the group is doing this, then we'll wear flannel and Doc Martens. Right? And if flannel and Doc Martens become corporatized, we'll move on to something else. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, the next couple groups, conformity is their big thing. Safety is their big thing. And that's why I think Xers, in their role now, the elders of the culture need to be able to say, hey, it's okay not to conform. Now, what's ironic about that is we just ended the series Stranger Things, where Will Byers explains that he doesn't like girls, and then he gave an interview. The actor gave an interview about this and said, "Yeah, what we just need to learn to do is accept ourselves, and if we accept ourselves, then we'll be happy." Now, I think that's a great beginning of a philosophy class. Is that true? And who is yourself? You're a self at 8 a.m., yourself at noon, yourself at 5 p.m. But that's not what he means. And what's ironic is he's using non-conformity words to conform. So he's saying, I find safety in the reigning sexual philosophy that no one's allowed to question, and that makes me brave. No, that's the opposite of brave. You're just doing what everyone else is doing. There was a great line from Lisa Simpson. She said to, I don't remember what the other character was doing. They thought they were rebelling. And Lisa Simpson said, "You're rebelling in a conformist fashion."
Right.
So corporate America, Netflix, says you can rebel against sexual morality if it's conservative, but not against John Money or Al Kinsey's sex philosophy. You have to accept those, and that makes you brave.
So do you believe universities have become hostile to dissenting viewpoints?
Well, on paper, they'll say no. And I do believe ASU, there's ASU's in internal conflicts over this. And thankfully, I think our president has said very publicly that we're for debates like this and has made some room for it. But he's not the only one that's in charge. And when you're at the 30,000 foot level, you're not down here in the faculty meetings where the real business gets conducted. So I think when we look at statistics like this one, in November 2024, College Fix did a survey of, I think, 3,000 ASU professors, and they self-identified as left or far left at 97%. The other 3% aren't all Republicans. Some of those are, some kind of libertarian who's probably also voting liberal. They only found like 5 or 6 Republicans. And you don't get that kind of hiring situation through fair hiring practices. And then when you're in that situation, like I am, can you speak up? It's what in First Amendment law it's called the chilling effect. Meaning, if there's a topic I know that will really inflame you both, I'm going to avoid that topic because I want to have a friendly conversation. And so if I'm in a faculty meeting and I know that there's some topic that's conservative that I care about, but it would make everyone else mad, well, I'm not going to bring it up. And so that happens to the conservative people in this setting, where it's not even like 60%, because you could feel the chilling effect at 51%, right? Because the majority is against you. It's 97%. So any university that doesn't correct that, but says they're for diversity and free speech is either lying to themselves or lying to us or both.
Well, I think the problem is they don't see that as a problem.
No, well, when you ask professors about it, they'll say that's because we're smart. Smart people are on the left. They almost always say that, but I think that should speak for itself, that the arrogance in saying that. Right.
So do you think we're training? Well, from what you just said, like it sounds like we're training students to avoid discomfort rather than pursue truth.
Yeah, but exactly, and that gets over to the psyop stuff I mentioned, because when we see stuff on the internet, I tell my kids and my students, just remember, the internet is fake. It's completely fake. It's run by corporations that want your eyes on the screen, and they'll say whatever it takes to keep your eyes there so they can run ads at you. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it's all about conformity. But there is, within psyops, there is the realization that there's some people, sometimes it's a whole generation, like Generation X, but within any group, there's going to be some group of people who feel themselves better because they don't conform.
Right.
And they are very good at getting that group to conform. And so therefore, the language you'll hear from someone like the Will Byers character is, I'm different. I'm not conforming. But they're doing the same thing as everyone else. They're pushing sexual morality to its limits, so to speak. So they are conforming. So there's something still where the culture, the corporate media culture, wants the audience to think they're not conforming when they're conforming both to this corporatization, which the communists should hate, but also to the same thing everyone's doing. Like in the old days, to rebel, you'd get a tattoo in the 50s.
Right.
Marlon Brando's character shows up and he's got a tattoo. And they're, oh, now if you don't get a tattoo, you're the odd man out. Because everyone's conforming to be a rebel. So I think there's something that the corporate Madison Avenue people see, okay, Americans want to believe they're a rebel. Let's make every single one of them believe they're a rebel while we sell them stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. It almost feels like that was squeaked by us because I hadn't even really thought of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it is. I mean,
we were being sold in that way, especially on television.
I think it hit our generation first because, you have something like MTV putting up Kurt Cobain. MTV is corporate America. They just want to make money.
Yep.
And they know that, the Beatles wearing nice suits and ties singing aren't going to sell to the Xers. So they want to corporatize a guy who says, I'm a rebel and I'm different. And so you'll see that message from MTV throughout the 80s and 90s until it just became a show about what were they eventually, real life seasons of. But until it was
reality
that,
TV,
and that's
all the music
that's when the show was over. Yeah,
but all the music until then was, you're a rebel, you're living different, you're on the cutting edge, but it's every single one of you, which means by definition you're not a rebel on the cutting edge. You're just being manipulated. And why did MTV do that? There's studies about this. I mean, corporations realized in the 80s, kids in the 80s have pocket change.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get that pocket change? Because they didn't necessarily have that in the 60s.
Right, selling records and albums to kids. Right,
Mm-hmm.
the Walkman just came out, so you could buy a cassette of your favorite band.
Yep.
Again, it's all about making money. And I think,
I think that needs us Xers to point that out, that help disillusion people from what we think we're doing. But I mean, the Will Byers little sermon about sexual morality, even people who are for the LGBTQ sex philosophy are rolling their eyes because it's so heavy-handed. Mm-hmm. And it's so just obviously the mood, meaning, hey, of course you're going to be okay. None of your friends is going to be upset with you for that in a Netflix TV show. You're going to be fine.
Right.
Like, you're not living in like Christianville, where I think the one time you see a guy reading the Bible, he's the typical Bible thumper who's an idiot jock, and he's dumb. Otherwise, there's no Christians in the show. Now that's another interesting thing. How did we flip to where nerd culture is universal? Meaning, you can guarantee in a high school show, if there's a bad guy, it's a jock.
Right.
Just like in an adult show, if there's a bad guy, it's either a businessman or a lawyer. In a high school show, it's a jock. Now, that wasn't always true. It used to be you wanted to be the quarterback or the cheerleader. But now they're bad guys, and at such a level that the nerds, everyone's a nerd. Right? And nerd means something like you play Dungeons and Dragons, you've memorized all the Star Trek episodes, you know the genealogies of elves from the Lord of the Rings, mm-hmm. you know the lore of Marvel. But now that's so common that big businesses can make billions of dollars on those movies. Whereas if you try to make a Lord of the Rings movie in the 80s, besides the graphics problem, there was a couple cartoons they made, but if you try to do a live action, really get into it the way Peter Jackson did, it wouldn't make enough money. It had to wait until nerd culture was everybody.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting too when you look back at Saved by the Bell or Family Matters, your Urkel or your Screeches or whatever,
Yeah.
And then you look at The Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, it's kind of exactly, yep.
The whole thing was reversed, yeah.
Yeah, there's something about being safe. So as Xers, we can relate to this. Our parents also had it. So it went from problems that are more localized, like the Great Depression or the famines coming out of Oklahoma during the Dust Bowl, can't grow any food, to World War II, which is, international. And then specifically what I was getting at is nuclear war. So post World War II, you all of a sudden, you're going to school in small town America, but you're doing drills where you hide under your desk and cover your head in case a nuke goes off. And all of a sudden you realize like your whole life could be threatened by someone you don't know anything about in Russia, and you're dead. And that creates a kind of fear and urgency. And so I think we grew up on the winning side, meaning we saw the end of the Cold War. And although that may, it shifted from all the bad guys in movies are Soviets to all the bad guys are rogue agents trying to get a nuclear bomb. But those, I think, felt different because you're like, well, the nations will hopefully keep people from getting rogue bombs. But I think the millennials grew up with 9/11. And so all of a sudden you actually have a strike on American territory. And therefore the sense of I need to be safe became like their main thing. And how do I stay safe? How do I avoid getting picked on? And so there's a few ways that happen. One is, well, you get rid of any culture where there's bullies, and the bullies are the jocks, so you make everybody a nerd. And then the other side is you have a massive government that promises you safety.
Yeah, it's interesting that, I've heard this lately. It's like, it seems like, we, again, overcorrected. We went to defining masculinity as toxic, right? Like growing up with toxic masculinity. And so it wasn't okay to be masculine anymore, like the jock, right? Yeah. And again, like, we live in America where sports are pretty much the number one thing still. Like NFL is humongous. If you want to be a millionaire, go into sports. Yeah. But also, companies like Facebook are paying AI guys hundreds of millions of dollars to come join them and build that AI platform. And it gets also into like what's happening chemically with us, like microplastics are in everything, and research shows that increases estrogen levels. I just read a study the other day that said that there was male fish that were now laying eggs in the Potomac River, I believe, because the microplastics are increasing the estrogen in the fish. And so I think we're seeing that as well. And so I honestly think that's why we see such a rise in the whole transgendered community, is because I think, one, it's hormonal for some. Two, it's acceptable, which last time I checked, there's, we were born male or female, but we could probably debate that, but
they'll say like, well, there's 1%, there's 1% or less that's intersex, but less than 1%. That's your 2 points.
So I mean, again, we're marginalizing and making the 0.0000001% of a society now the major focus, and it's such a divisible thing. Like people argue on the right and left all day long about that, and I'm like, do you even know somebody that is that way? Like really? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe not.
I don't know.
Definitely again, from TV.
Like you said, right? It's that corporate media trying to control us, keep us divided, because the old adage is divide and conquer. Right?
Well,
and we're being conquered.
Well, and I mean, people need to realize, I mentioned German intellectuals, post-World War II, communists. Go back and read Freud, or Freud too, but Marx and Engels, Lenin. One of the first things they want to do is get rid of Christianity because they know that's holding back communism. And then the specific way to do that is by destroying the family. And so Lenin, for example, wanted sex, to be so common, it's like drinking a glass of water. You want to get sex, you can get it anywhere you want. Because as soon as you detach sex from marriage, men have no reason at all to get married. And therefore, the kids will now need to be raised by who? Well, by the government, because a single mom will need to take care of them. And so I think this is just continued. This is like the tip of the spear today, that there aren't even men and women, is that, still part of the same strategy. Because if there aren't even men and women, you can redefine marriage, which we've already done legally, for two people. But why two? We had an event last fall at ASU about the benefits of polyamory. So you don't even need to keep two people. Why not just have a group of people who can call them all married and make marriage purely illegal? It's a business agreement about who inherits and if you can visit people in the hospital. That's all it's about. And there's no
Right.
spirituality. And I mean, if you want that, you can find some priestess who will do that for you. But I think that that's part of why we see this continued sexual revolution is behind it is this philosophy of let's destroy any remembrance or semblance of the family. Now, when we look at statistics, we know that fatherless children raised without their father statistically are at a great disadvantage for crime and poverty. And so that makes you wonder, well, wait a minute, I thought all of these liberal professors loved to help the disadvantaged. But if you want to get a group of them upset, bring up those statistics. And they will do backflips to explain away fatherlessness as not a big problem. But
Right.
sociologist after sociologist has to be honest and say, no, the data tells us that's if you just cured that, you'd cure so many of these other problems. But that requires us believing there are men and women and that fathers should be fathers. And when you've created a culture who cares about safety more than it cares about doing what is right, then you've essentially got to communism. I mean, Mamdani, when he became New York mayor 2 days ago, said, we're getting rid of individualism and we're going to collectivism. So yeah,
Right.
New York City is now, for all intents and purposes, a communist city.
Yeah, I think again we're overcorrecting, right? Another thing I like to say is we need to stop being a society of me's and be a society of we. And I don't think people sometimes get that, right? Like, stop thinking about yourself and start thinking as a collective what benefits all the people, not just like one group or exceptionalism. But
Yeah. Well, I
So-
think that. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, this naturally leads into a question people argue about constantly, but rarely define, is that whole separation of church and state. So,
Yeah. Well, I
What-
think, let's get to that because that'd be fun to talk
Yeah.
about what is meant by church. But to the point,
Right.
real quick, about think of me and not we. I think in general, if you were just to ask like conservatives and liberals, they would all agree. Yeah, we need to think about our people we care about, our families, our communities. But it's more a question about how to do that. That's the essential difference. So, for example, is a risk-taking businessman helping community? Well, the college-educated person would say, no, that's a bad person. But the truth is, yes, that's someone who's helping his community. He just developed a company that hires 10,000 people. And sure, he gets a Rolex and a Lambo and a yacht, but now there's a huge industry that exists that wouldn't have existed beforehand that you're looking to the government to provide. And so one of the, besides teaching logic, I just want college kids to read Soviet history. When the government provides stuff, you may not like your private sector employer, well, then work for the government for a while and see what that's like. So I think that the question for us would be not so much like, oh, no, we need to get rid of individualism, but how do we help people the best? Also, but with this reality, existence hurts. The great philosopher Wesley from Princess Bride said, if anyone tells you otherwise, they're selling you something. So the idea that you could somehow create an existence that is so safe you'll never suffer, you're not going to get that in capitalism or communism.
no. And I think, our whole society is based on scarcity. And like the models that we've built economically is based on scarcity. And I think with, technology coming, and we'll get to this a little later, we're approaching a time of abundance where people can have pretty much everything. So, so let's tackle the church and state thing. So
defining that.
What does separation of church and state actually mean?
In the setting, the context is the nations of Europe had official state churches that you, as a citizen, were born a member of. So you were a member of the Church of England just by virtue of being born an English person. And the United States said, we're not going to have a United States church like that. We're not going to make the Church of the United States the way there's the Church of England or the Lutheran Church in Germany. And incidentally, those nations still have those. And those churches still get tax money for some things. I mean, they're not doing well. I'm not saying they're doing well,
Right.
but if you live in England, there's a high chance you're an atheist paying taxes to the Church of England, right? Which in America would say that is nuts. Richard Dawkins made that point in one video I saw of his where he said, yeah, I'm a member of the Church of England. I'm the best known atheist in the world. And by being English, I'm put into the Church of England. And so the United States said, we're not going to do that. What it didn't mean is that the government can't have any moral beliefs or values. It can't have any beliefs about the nature of reality. such as, for example, what our Declaration of Independence says, which is that God created us.
Right.
So those aren't off limits. What happened was, I call this the Madeline Murray O'Hare deal. And people may not remember her, but in the 60s, she was a really famous, outspoken communist in America, and she sued the federal government and went all the way to the Supreme Court to get prayer out of schools, and she won. Mm-hmm. This is, I think, in 63 or 4. And so she was like, after that, the organizer for the Texas Communist Party. And she was murdered. Her son, and her granddaughter were brutally murdered. It was horrible, head cut off, by one of her communist employees. I'm not sure how that works, an employee in communism, who was mad that he didn't get paid on time. So it's like, what? Like, this wasn't like a Bible thumper who was mad about atheist communists. This was another communist who kidnapped him and cut their heads off. It was awful. But what happened from this deal was the American conservative Christians said, okay, we agree. We won't do any prayer or 10 commandments in the schools anymore. The communists didn't agree to not do that. And so for the last 60 years, they've had their ideology ruling uncontested in public education, K through 12 and the college, because all the Christian conservatives said, yeah, you're right. We won't. That's partisan. That's not the First Amendment. But that isn't what the First Amendment says. Our coins are not violations of the First Amendment. In God we trust. That doesn't make you go to church on Sunday. That doesn't establish a Church of America. And pretty well every president, when I ask people, hey, which recent presidents have said America's a Christian nation? They're shocked to find out Bill Clinton said that. Mm-hmm. Now, Jimmy Carter might not surprise them if they know who Jimmy Carter is. He was teaching Sunday school, but people on the outside just know he's a Democrat. Jimmy Carter said we're a Christian nation. So they didn't violate the First Amendment by saying that, because none of you have to go to church or read the Bible. But the truth is, that's the cult. That's the setting out of which the United States emerged. It didn't emerge out of Islam or Hinduism.
Is the question really about religion, though, or more about moral authority and where it comes from, do you think?
I think you're right. Yeah, 100% is that's where people would get their moral authority to say X or Y, or X, Y, or Z is wrong or right to do. But as a philosopher, I'd say like the first 10 years of my career, the most common thing I'd spent the first couple of weeks of Philosophy 101 on, well, even though I believe in God, was talking with the Christian students and arguing that the arguments they give for God's existence are not sound. And I think they need to do better than those. And in other words, my concern as a philosophy professor was not the conclusion they get to per se, but you got there in an illogical way, and therefore, even if your belief's true, you don't know that it's true, and it won't benefit you then. But it's really shifted in my classes. I have very few students arguing anymore pro-God, but with unsound arguments. They're all saying things like, well, my truth says, but what they say after that is the same thing all their peers are saying. My truth says, do whatever feels sexually good. And it's like, yeah, but guys, isn't that just like the animals? I mean, aren't we humans, though? Can't we, like, moderate our passions and direct them to things? And you've all been taught that to be authentic to yourself means whatever passion comes in your life, you identify yourself with it and make everyone else around you conform to that. Instead of learning self-control and saying, yeah, I've got all kinds of desires, but I need to control 99% of them.
Right.
So I think there's something there about authenticity that's coming. It's part of the cultural evolution of the 60s. And it continues in a little different way for the Xers and then for millennials and Zoomers. But it's a thread through the whole post-World War II time period, is that you need the best life. The most important thing you can do is be authentic. And what's ironic is the corporations have cashed in on that.
Yeah.
Like I tease my students, to be authentic now, like to be an actual rebel, get 0 tattoos, and spend Friday nights in your public library reading Aristotle. You're an actual rebel at that point.
Right.
Or settle down and get married, man. We've got this whole culture of the red pill, right? And why would I get married? I could just go out and do this or whatever.
Yeah.
I've got OnlyFans at my disposal at all times. And why do I want to invest my time in this woman who has an OnlyFans account? I mean, this whole thing is getting so nuts.
Yeah, this woman and her boyfriend can cause you a lot of troubles, So you'd be like, yeah, why do I want to settle down? But yeah, you're right. Marriage from a purely naturalistic perspective, where your goal in life is just to please yourself, is not attractive at all. Like, why would you do that? So for guys or girls. But what they're finding right now, so statistically, is that it's the guys who are starting to say, hey, we do need marriage, and it's the girls who are saying, nah, not for me, no thanks.
Right.
Whereas we have an intuition before that the girls want marriage, the guys don't.
Yeah, it's the opposite now. It's not the woman fighting for sexual revolution or her freedom, to do what she will with her body. It's the man's not interested in it now because he's probably just got, everything's at his fingertips. Everything that he wants to see or whatever is available to him.
Yeah.
And it's so I love this discussion because all of these questions have existed before, right?
Yeah.
But now technology has changed the stakes. Even when it comes to religion, even when it comes to sex, even when that's what.
Yeah, because I think Jared said something a moment ago about how we're coming into a time of abundance where no one will lack anything. And I think what you meant was, material things like housing, clothing, food, and water.
Correct.
And that's the premise of the dystopia Brave New World, which really is kind of like the grandfather of the dystopian, because that's something else to notice is that the millennials all live on dystopian stories. That's all they have. They just go from dystopian series to dystopian series. And really that's what's interesting about Lord of the Rings is it became a $1 billion industry with zero sex. Like if you look at the Game of Thrones, they specifically did imagery with what they called sex positioning, which is you and I are the actual characters talking, but behind us there's a naked woman doing something who's not even part of the story.
Dude, I tried to watch Game of Thrones, man. It was a porno.
And exactly. Lord of the Rings, just to think about it. It had romance with zero sex, zero nudity. And then on top of that, it was a positive outcome. In the end, the good guys win, and all of them in different ways end up having happy ever afters. And that's really one of the last ones like that. Then you get Hunger Games, Walking Dead, and there's no happy endings, and they try to sell it on sex, not on any kind of imagination or creativity. And so that's one of the things that you'll notice about Hollywood is it wants you to pay money to be safe while constantly telling you you're not safe. And giving you
it drives that fear narrative.
Yeah, it drives a fear narrative. So I've got all that from Brave New World, because as a philosopher, I can tell everyone having an abundance will actually only aggravate your problem, because work is a good thing for humans. It distracts you from some of your issues when you have to go out and farm. As soon as you have everything provided to you by the government, you realize my life is empty and meaningless. I'm a cog in a machine. I'm just a collection of atoms that will disperse at my death. And so in Brave New World, the government has to start putting LSD in the drinking water, or else its community will collapse into utter despair.
Yeah, do you think in that kind of a society, though, with abundance, wouldn't it allow humanity to focus on those other things of like improving self? And
yeah, you'd hope so. But what Aldous Huxley does there,
having that philosophy and philosophical systems.
Guys like me and you maybe would say, "Oh, I hope that's true." But what Aldous Huxley shows, and unfortunately I think is closer, is you start to give abundance, and people just revert to their basest desires. And so you have the greatest technology ever invented, the internet and the phones we use to get on it, and all the electricity needed, all the infrastructure needed. This is beyond the pyramids and other ancient wonders. It's amazing, and it's used for OnlyFans. Right? The basest urges you can imagine. It's not used. You'll find, of course, philosophy on there, but that's 0.01%. 90% of it is pornography.
Yeah, and I think pornography is humongous, again, because since we've pushed that fear narrative, we've made men afraid to go talk to women, right? And then they're like, why do I need to go talk to women when I could just watch some porn?
Or now you'll get
same
and the AI girlfriend takes it beyond. The AI girlfriend's nuts.
Correct.
Because now it's not like a cartoon. It's like an actual 4D human being, and she says all the things you want to hear and texts you throughout the day. You get texts, "Hey, sweetie, just thinking about you right now." Why would you need a human who has bad days and doesn't always look perfect and can argue with you? Your AI girlfriend doesn't.
Correct. So I think, we're creating something that knows us better than we know ourselves now.
Yeah, to be manipulated. Yeah,
Right.
I think that's true. I think AI. I say a couple things about AI when people bring up like should we be afraid of it. One is if you've seen what it does, we're fine. Like, in other words, it's not sending robots back from the future, super robots right now. Like, it's making just try talking to chat for 10 minutes and it becomes just the most absurd hallucinations imaginable. Like, chat can't even hold a 10-minute conversation. We're fine right now. It's really just a super Google who can do some assistant, some stuff like, hey, chat, remind me tomorrow at 10 a.m. to go do something, which Siri could also do 10 years ago. But that's the one side, the engineering side. The scary side, I think, is its ability to manipulate us in the way we're talking about right now. And we do have the technology. We've already had it. We've had it for 50 years. It's just getting more and more refined to do crowd control. And that's really talking about psyops. That's the basis of the research done during the Cold War by both the Soviets and the West, was how do we control the other guys' group? How do we get the Soviet kids to like American rock and roll and bring about the end of the Soviet Empire? But then the Cold War ends, and that same research can be used on your own population. How do we control them?
Correct.
And so I think the current iteration is just another one of those. It's not like like AI suddenly is this new level of it. No, it's just the same thing, but we all agree to hold one of these all through the day and have it with us all the time. Mm-hmm. How did we make that agreement? When did that happen? Yeah, but we've all agreed on it.
And it's always listening to you.
It's always listening to you. Yep.
Yep.
I had to decide. Costco had this great sale on TVs, but I knew they've got a microphone in them.
Right.
Like, do I want Samsung listening? And I get a great affordable TV. Like, people think, like, I asked some people I know, like, why do you think Costco has these deals? Like, it was crazy. It was more than I've ever seen. Cheaper. It was an amazing deal. Right. Why do you think all of a sudden, like, are companies just being nice to us? No, they want their machine in your house.
Yeah, Sam Tripoli and I talked about this on the Tinfoil Hat podcast. We did an episode about psyops, and he brought that up. He was like, why do you think TVs are so cheap? Why are they so affordable? Because they want them in your living room. They want you to have that.
Yeah, they want them in your house, and it's been that way for a while with other kinds of personal technology. The companies aren't necessarily making money on the iPhone sale. Now they have their device in your hands by which they can make their money. And so, I think here's the, if someone said, give me a one sentence way to protect myself, like, should I burn my cell phone and move into the woods? And now I love the woods, but I also need a job in the city. So I like getting out in nature, no doubt, but I don't think that's the solution. I think the solution is learn how to think, because that will make you impervious. So that even if you're holding one of these, you're impervious to its manipulation.
Correct. And that's not what we're teaching kids anymore. Yeah,
we're teaching them to go along with the system and to be afraid of anyone who steps outside of it.
Right, and I argue with a lot of people too that education has become just training workforces.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Right?
Well, it's very
not
conscious.
About thinking. Yeah, you can't question things. Like my biggest thing, and I think my superpower is I question everything.
Yeah, it's fun.
Right, like it just. Why, right? How is it, why is that way? Is there a better way to do that, right? And then listen to people's other opinions. Sure, I'll have my own opinion on how to do it, but that shared collective of talking and communicating, and even, like you said, debating earlier, leads us to, I think, better outcomes for humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think the education philosopher John Dewey turned the 1900s very consciously said we need mass education to make mass workers.
Yep.
And then when you get into a school room setting, who is the troubled kid? Who's the problem kid? The little boy who squirms and can't sit still for 8 hours and do what he's told. Well, now we need pharmaceuticals to make him sit still for 8 hours and do what he's told. Instead of, no, he'll be taught by his parents, and he spends a lot of time with his dad, who's out doing stuff also. So yeah, he needs to learn history, he needs to learn literature, but he also needs to be around his dad and do stuff and learn how to fix things. And then you don't have the problem of squirming, because we're not meant to sit for 8 hours and just be inside. We're meant to do stuff.
At what point does intelligence stop being a tool and start becoming something that we relate to. Do you think we'll ever see that?
What do you mean? Like something that we want to have? To be like?
Like something like now we're using it as a tool, right? Like say I want to say I want to take on a project or something like that. So now I'm chat GPTing on how to, the best way to approach this project. When do you think it'll actually be like, do you think it'll ever be something that we actually just relate to?
Well, tell me what you mean by relate. Like relate to it the way a guy does with an AI girlfriend?
We could, I suppose. But I
Like
find
as
that's a dangerous game, dating a Tesla, because man, she's got all your passwords, you know.
I know it
Like,
is. Yep. But she
like
also
relating
never.
to it, yeah, relating to it like on a personal level, like because my experience with ChatGPT is that I try to use it as a tool. I use it like an assistant, right? We had
Yeah.
Dr. Nelva Lee come on here the other day, and we talked to her about that. It's
Yeah.
a great assistant
It is.
for
Yeah.
people who can't afford an assistant, right? So we're
Well, that's
using
what
it
I've
like
said
a
too,
tool.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
an
we're
equalizer
using it-
because the rich professor, which I'm a state school professor, the rich professor, he gets 2 or 3 research assistants to help him. And now he's out there saying, oh, AI is so stupid. Yeah, pal, because now I have a research assistant too. And you don't like the competition. So for
Yeah,
that reason,
right.
I think it's a great equalizer. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's why we need to kind of limit how AI evolves. Like, there's a lot of people that, even the fathers of AI that created it are now saying, hey, okay, it's time to slow down. Right? Like,
Well, yeah.
if we do AGI or super intelligence, like, if the AI becomes intelligence, like, it can just decide, well, humans are a threat, right?
Oh, yeah.
And get
That's
rid
the
of us.
basis of all
Or-
our
Right,
Terminator
or it can say,
and
or it can say humans are morons. We're not going to stick around and leave. Which
Yeah,
I think
that'd
a
be
lot of
funny, too.
people are like, yeah, okay, cool.
I like that one. They just
Right.
make a spaceship and take off.
Right, but humans are creating it, so I think we're going to inject our bias and our faults.
Yeah,
into
because
those
it has to.
systems.
I mean, it's a pure logical system, but it needs values put in.
Correct.
Meaning values. I don't just mean like value of I like to have breakfast, but I mean values as in this is what I reason from. It can't just be blank. But I think that's our fear of technology, and this goes to your earlier question you made about immortality. Probably the novel that started that off was Frankenstein. But the reason why it's a good novel, one of the reasons is it overlaps with the medieval alchemist and brings into modernity. So it brings both worlds together because the medieval alchemist wanted to find immortality also,
Right.
but didn't
Philosopher's
understand
Stone.
material science. Yeah, or looking for the fountain of youth. You're willing to cross the Atlantic to look around Florida for the fountain of youth. And so this desire to be immortal isn't like a new AI thing. This is just another iteration of it. And this idea that if you can make a chat that sounds just like me, and when you do Zoom meetings, it makes a video just like this, that passes what's called the Turing test. It means that Jared and Ian don't know if it's Owen or it's chat, but that's not really me.
Yeah, and we're there. Like I've seen some of the stuff from Google's VO3 and the deepfake technology.
Yep.
It's very difficult to tell what's real and what's not. And so I think that's why like Google in their platform with VO3, they put in digital markers so that their systems know that it generated video.
Yeah,
But that needs to be again coming back to a consensus for humanity, not just the US, because China's developing AI too, and Russia and all these other countries. Like as a species, like we need to get on the same page and go, all right, we need to put some guardrails on this thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like we can't just keep going this direction because then you'll no longer be able to believe anything you read, see, or hear.
Yeah.
So what is truth? Right? It's what
Well,
the
yeah.
corporations tell you it is.
Yeah, and in one way we're there. Like,
Right.
even without the AI advances, you can't believe anything you read here. But the interesting thing, like, let's compare the technologies, the nuclear bomb and AI. I think AI is much less of a threat because all of us can do this. Shuts his computer down. And a lot of my day, a lot of what I do on here has nothing to do with my livelihood, my income, how I stay in existence. Whereas the nuclear bomb threat happens to you. You're just going along your day, like the scene from T2. You're at the playground overlooking downtown LA, and then it gets nuked. And so I think the AI thing, in one way, the international consensus can try to protect from nuclear bombs, but then some rogue agent gets it, like in Mission Impossible, every single movie. But
Right.
but with AI, it'll just be like, you know what? I can go back to a flip phone, or I'll even have a phone on the wall. I'm fine. I just need to call someone once or twice a week, and it's a little bit easier to all agree. And the reason I bring that up is, I think if you trace the fear around AI in the last 3 years, it's traceable to the founders of AI, meaning the what's his name, Sam Bankman-Fried, that did Chat. I know that's not his name, something like that. The owner of Chat, he paid for articles to be written about how Chat is indeed AI, because it's not artificial intelligence, and that it's a scary thing. Well, why would the owner of a business want articles written that the thing he's selling is scary? Because no one's paying attention to Chat, and all of a sudden everyone's getting alerts on their news. Chat's about to take over. I better find out what Chat is. So engineering friends I have who work in the industry said, it's all overplayed. We're at the height. This is the extreme level. There's nothing without light years of advances. We can't do much more than we're doing. And the guys who are selling the fear mongering are the guys who own the AI companies.
Correct. Because we've prophetized fear.
Yeah.
So, and fear sells. Fear and sex. So,
Yep.
So if let's see. So what happens when people start trusting AI more than spiritual traditions? Could AI become a new moral authority in the future?
I think you're already seeing it. I think there's already AI priests and AI churches, but the just like there's AI psychologists, you can do like entry level psychology therapy just with Chat. And Chat you could tell Chat, hey, I want a Freudian therapist, or I want a cognitive behavioral therapist, and I want a trauma informed therapist, and Chat will be able to do pretty well. But so we're always seeing that. Same with priests. But I think what, as a philosopher, I'd point out is you're basically going to the computer for answers that in the old days you might have to drive to church to get, but you still have to evaluate the answers. Right? Like if you're the kind of personality that just blindly believes what a computer tells you, you've got bigger problems than the church on the AI, right? You got to learn how to start thinking.
Right. Getting back to your point on critical thinking and teaching that more.
Yeah, if you're so easily going along with that, or you just assume what's on the internet is good, then we need to help you out.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff lately on talking about the future of humanity and becoming immortal. There's a Harvard professor that's talking about we'll be able to take a pill and reverse aging to back to be like 24. So, what happens to religion when death is optional?
Yeah, what's the There's a famous tech guy who's doing that. He's like 50 now, but his body's at the 17-year-old level. I forget his name.
Oh yeah, because he harvests his kids' stem cells and all that stuff.
Yeah, everything weird. Yeah,
I forget the guy's name.
Well, let me. Plato said this. Thing. I think Plato's right. He said immortality without knowing the good would be a curse. And so it's not just a matter of religion, because what you're getting at is that most people believe religion is a set of things to do so that you get a good afterlife. And that is one version of religion. That's not, I don't believe that's, for example, the essence of Christianity. That'd be a different podcast. But you're right. Most people think about religion that way. They start to think about death. And so they say, okay, what do I got to do to make sure I've got a good reincarnation or a good trip to heaven or whatever it is? And so take away death, and they're never worried about that. But that's only one kind of religion, and it still leaves you with the problem. Because the answer in those religions, the answer is, well, be a good person. If you're a good person, you'll have a good reincarnation or a good trip to heaven. And so you're still faced with, even if you live forever, being a good person. And so I think there's some sci-fi that explores this, like, what's the one, Altered Carbon?
Oh yeah, Altered Carbon.
Where you could have, the richest of the rich do have a kind of immortality by downloading it into a computer, and if you die, you can you can clone a body and put the backup into the clone. Right. But they're all miserable people in the movie. Now you could say, well, that's just the artist being heavy-handed, but I'm not sure it is, because just thinking, you get tired of being an adolescent. Like the things that interest an adolescent, which is the stuff that sells on the internet, it's not deep. It gets boring. And so, what would you be like at 200 if you're still just pursuing?
Those
cheap
same
sex,
carnal base, right?
You're 200. I remember there was a movie, our age of movie, Oh, wow, I had it in my mind and I dropped it right when I said that. It's the movie about the stoner high school kids. I said, well, that's every extra movie. That doesn't help, Owen.
Right.
But what's that called? But it had a lot of famous
Dazed and
people.
confused.
Yeah, Dazed and Confused.
Yeah.
And I think it was McConaughey in that. I think it might be his character.
Oh yeah.
And he's
Oh,
like
yeah.
24. And a high schooler says, "Why are you still at our parties?" And he said, "Man, because I keep getting older, but the girls stay the same age." And at 24, you can kind of understand that. But at 400,
Right.
like the 400 year old is still at the 17-year-old parties.
Dude, and it makes you wonder, man, if what happens to the meaning of life if death becomes optional? Mm-hmm. Like, what happens?
That's what's
then?
so crazy, yeah. The whole, I mean, death is so important in one weird sense. I actually have a whole class I teach every fall called The Philosophy of Death and Dying. And it's not a therapy class about how to deal with the fact that you will die. It's a philosophy class. Like, why is it? Because you're right, this is so important. And all of the different philosophies and religions, and I use that, generically, atheists are in that brain, atheism too, are all attempts to explain death. It's so central to us. But again, I think
Right,
if you
'cause-
remove it, or you push it out 1,000 years, or you remove it altogether, it doesn't actually help us. Because we're still faced with this question of, well, how do you be a good person then?
Right. And my other thing, like with altered carbon, right, like, is if you are uploading your consciousness into a computer system and then your body dies and then you download it into a new clone, did your soul follow you?
Well, that's the that's the
Right?
thing
Or
is,
are you just information? Right?
it's,
Like,
yeah, that all
and
of that
is-
philosophy.
What is the soul? Right?
Yeah, you're
Is
right. All of that
something that's-
philosophy is just about phenomenon, not about substance. In other words, there isn't a thing called a soul. There's just your information, and then making something that's a copy of that information. So you're right, 100%. I
Right.
think here's where it shows up in pop culture. People don't pick up on this very often in Star Trek. What are these transporters?
Yep.
These kill you, and then they
Correct.
make a clone. And everyone in the Star Trek world is fine with the fact that I'll be murdered on this thing, but there will be a copy of me that continues. And so there's no, and it's just it's built in. No one talks about it in the show. They just do it as if it's just like drinking water. But I would be like, whoa, I'll take a ship down. It takes an extra 10 minutes to take that little ship. I'll take that because I don't want to be killed. Because, yeah, my soul is not my information. If you have a copy of me talking, that's not me.
Correct. Yeah, I've always wondered that too in
Yeah.
Star Trek, and especially once I found out what teleporters were. And I'm just like, so you're destroying your copy here and reassembling it on another planet from the materials that are there that
Mm-hmm.
make you you. How does your soul get anchored to your physical body then?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Is
even
there a
I think
map
that's a
for
big
that?
problem for any one of us who's a substance dualist of mind and a body. But I think it's even a problem just for the atheist, just because
Oh, yeah.
that's not you anymore. That's not your brain. That's a different brain.
Right. And so that gets me into technology about, kind of living forever in uploading your consciousness into systems.
Yeah.
We talked yesterday with the CEO of Reflecta, has a technology where you can now take your loved ones, take 10
Yeah,
minutes or a couple minutes of their voice and speech, upload that into their system, and then fill out this profile of that person. And you can, after it builds that profile of that person, you can now talk to them
Yeah.
with their voice. And they're no longer here, but, we're now kind of making that jump to living forever. Because, I mean, how many people actually talk to their, and every day, unless
Yeah.
you live like next door to your mom or
Yeah.
dad or whatever, it's mostly through text and phone calls. And so you're now making it so you, like myself, I could go out, sign up for that that technology and start uploading
Yeah.
all my
And
thoughts,
text, yeah.
all my voice, all my video. And so when my great grandkids are here and I'm gone, am I really gone anymore? Right?
Yeah.
Because they can just have a conversation with me. Like
And it's
I
probably like how you would have responded. Like if they text you, that's probably how you would have texted back then. Although if it's your great grandkids and you still exist as a soul, you've developed a lot since then. So it might not be how you would respond now.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's going to be really just like the AI girlfriend, AI dead relatives, or praying to the dead through technology gets to your religion question. And I think one funny side of that is that people can't stand their relatives when they're alive. Somehow, like, dying sanctifies everybody, where you're like, oh, this was the greatest person ever. Well, wait, a week ago you hated him. So the idea that now I tease people who say that, like, heaven is I die and I go be with my family forever. I think, no, you mispronounce it. That's called hell, right? Like, in this life, if you said to someone, you can go and be at a family event for the rest of existence, they would say, no, thank you. Right? I barely can make it through 1 hour. So it is funny, this idea that, well, now you can be with that relative, though they're on your phone forever. No, thank you.
Right.
But that's a funny side. But the downside of it is just the personal development side of it. Of, yeah, I mean, what kind of a person are you if you're investing a machine with all of your emotions?
Do you think we have a greater thirst for legacy these days with all or is it just we've caught up with technology? Like, the technology's there, so we're going to do it. But it seems
I think that's
like,
been,
yeah, I mean, that's
like, the main answer to death has been legacy. And so that was the pyramids, right? Or donating money to a hospital so that there's a wing of a hospital named after you. But so now, just like I said earlier, maybe AI lets all of us professors have research assistants. Now we might be able to say, we've democratized legacy, so to speak, where I'm never going to be a billionaire that can build a hospital or a pyramid, but I am having some kind of legacy. So I think that does tap into a deep human need. But what I point out for students is it's like a concession need. So one famous character where this shows up in literature is Achilles from the Iliad. And Achilles wants to be remembered by everyone as the greatest warrior. That's how he'll achieve immortality, by being remembered, a legacy. Because in the Greek view at that time, your soul isn't really you. It's kind of like a remembrance of you. It's like a shadowy you that lives in the underworld. And so he thought, that's the best I can do. It's like a concession. I'll get legacy at least, because when we're dead, we're dead. What continues on in the pagan Greek world is not really me. And so I think, yeah, that's a concession. But what if, we've talked kind of gloomily about immortality, but what if you could be a good person and immortal? Well, that's what Plato didn't say, don't be immortal. He said, don't be immortal and not know what is good, be evil. But what if you could be good? And so that opens up a whole nother can of worms of how can I become a good person? Because the things that we're trying in our culture don't work. We believe, for example, that if I educate people, they'll become good. Well, that doesn't work. If I have a government take care of them, they'll become good. Well, that doesn't work. So we're still faced with this same problem because all of us recognize, we don't have to say we're the most evil person ever, but we can recognize, there's things about me that aren't good. And I've tried to change them. By the time you get to our age, you've had a lot of New Year's resolutions that didn't work. And so we're still left with this problem. Yeah, how do I become a good person? And that's one of the things I think Christianity uniquely solves, is answering that particular problem. Because Christianity does, on the inside, say even physical death will be removed. But it also predicts that the fallen human is going to try to get back into Eden any way they can. And so that's why after Adam and Eve are kicked out of Eden, God puts a guard there. You can't get back into Eden your way. You have to go God's way. But whether it's the Philosopher's Stone, the Fountain of Youth, or AI, humans have been trying to get back to immortality some way without God.
Yeah, like a way to right the wrongs. What values do you think humanity needs to guard most fiercely moving forward?
Yeah, I think if I had to narrow down, I'd say the one I would narrow down to is the need for meaning. So I don't know if you guys have read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, but he is a Holocaust survivor, and he talks about how, they did little things to try to find meaning in their life in the Holocaust prisons.
The prison camps, yeah.
And the people who would die just kind of give up and die on their own accord, not because they're murdered by the Nazis, are the ones who eventually just thought, life has no meaning. And so I don't think a robot can do that for you. It could give you a great philosophy lecture, but it's the same as me. Like, do you think my students all listen to my great philosophy lectures? No. So we're still left with this problem. Even with the best AI teacher ever invented, people don't want to listen because they've got other things they're doing. So I think that's the one thing that anyone can relate to. Whatever culture you go to, whatever time you go to, you'll find that their literature is about the meaning of life.
So what do you think we should protect as we move forward?
How do we protect that desire?
Or what should we protect as we move forward, just as human species?
Well,
Values, morals,
I'm a big fan of
spirituality.
the United States in its founding ideals. And so the United States hasn't always enacted those, which is one reason we had a civil war, but it provided us with a framework by which we can be more and more consistently living about those ideals. And so I mentioned the United States as, what do we want to protect? We want to protect the individuals matter. And we want to protect that they aren't the property of a government, and that they have the right to do what they think is best for their lives, which is seek meaning as they would like to seek. And they have the right to contrary thoughts and to do things that the masses don't agree with. So I think all of the protections built into the United States, we want to protect those and not hand them over to a collectivist. Now, I know your point earlier, Jared. You're right. We think about what will help others. We're not just the way that communists get the individuals. They say, "Oh, you just care about yourself." No individualist really just only cares about himself. Maybe Andrew Tate, right? But the rest of everyone has some people they care about, and they want to make the world a better place. But that only happens when individuals matter and they have metaphysical and legal rights.
What gives you hope now?
Well, I think my hope is because I'm a Christian. So I think the best secular attempts will produce some good things, but ultimately produce failures. And that's why we have the dystopian industry. We have movie series after movie series. There's some truth in it. Some of it is the manipulation we've been talking about, but some of it is people despair. They don't think a government will tell them the truth. And it's only gotten worse after COVID. And therefore, none of that will give them any hope. Unless it's true that God exists and God is good, then there isn't any final hope. The only hope is get yours and get out.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. All right, Dr. Owen, we've reached a portion of the show that we like to call Jared's Five.
All right, so these are 5 questions I ask every guest. One is from our previous guest for you.
All right.
And then the last one will be a question from you for our next guest. So, as I said, our last guest was the CEO of Reflecta, right? Building that platform to upload your thoughts and your lost loved ones that you can talk to. And his question was, if you had a story on a multi-generational platform like Reflecta, right? And you could have a conversation with your great-great-grandfather, what would be the first question you would ask them?
Well, I guess I would clarify, knowing that it isn't my great-great-grandfather, but
Right.
a computer simulating that from some information it has. And so, yeah, I would want to ask them what we're talking about now. Like, how do you find meaning in your life? Not just like purpose. That's a little bit different. Like the purpose of our talking today is information or entertainment or making some money on Google, but what's the meaning of your life? How does it make sense to you? That'd be really interesting to hear from a family member from a couple centuries ago.
Yeah. Great question, or great answer. All right, so what was your favorite movie of all time?
Man, I need to get better at this one because I've had people ask me that just casually, like get to know me questions, and I'm kind of like, man, I do watch movies and TV shows, and I'm able to draw on them quite often in philosophy as philosophy examples. I haven't seen Dazed and Confused in, man, has it been
Forever.
30 years now, right, since it came out? But I remember that because that line stood out to me. So I think favorite movie would depend on my mood. Like, what am I doing? Like, I think the movie Amadeus is amazing, but that's a really serious movie. You don't want to just like, hey, it's fun time, Friday night, let's watch Amadeus. But it's really well done in so many levels. I really like it. But then, yeah, just like, hey, I just want to have fun and do something silly, movies or TV shows. I mean, I'm always kind of going back to classic Simpsons. First 5-6 years, I know it's not a movie, but first 5-6 years when you've got episodes written by guys like Conan O'Brien are just genius. And particularly if you haven't seen When Homer Goes Back to College, written by Conan O'Brien in season 5, you got to watch that one.
All right, favorite cartoon as a kid growing up?
Well, there you go. As a kid growing up, so I pretty much came into watching not just Looney Tunes, but watching like more serious cartoons the same time Simpsons hit.
Yeah.
So people will ask me, "Do you just sit around watching The Simpsons?" And I don't. I actually haven't seen The Simpsons in years. And when I've seen the more recent ones, I'm always like prepared to be disappointed. Although I'm actually more surprised that they're not as bad as I thought they'd be. Mm-hmm. But someone made an interesting point about them to me recently, that the original Simpsons, like the first 6-7 seasons, were written by people who knew a ton about pop culture.
Right.
And the current Simpsons are written by people who know a ton about The Simpsons. And that does give a little bit different flavor to them. But yeah, I think Simpsons probably in its take is very Generation X, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Jeff.
All right. What's one thing that people don't know about you that maybe they should?
I'm kind of public, so that's a good question. What is one thing they know? I don't know. That they should know too. That's a key part of the question, is
right.
and that they should know it, because there's lots they don't know, but that they should know.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually a softie. I don't think you'd ever guess that from coming across, like, having to debate and be a public intellectual and be the only guy speaking up. You don't come across as a softie, but I'm actually a softie. And if you got to know me personally, you'd be like, "Wow, you're a really nice guy, Owen."
Right. That's awesome. All right. If you could go back in time and tell your teenage self one thing, what would it be?
Oh man, yeah. I've actually got I got 2 kids left as teenagers, 2 in their early 20s. So I've actually thought that exact thing many times. It's been more than one, because you'll see things like, "Oh, I know I did that same thing." But yeah, I think if I had to go back and say one specific thing, it would be have integrity. Live the beliefs you say you live. And if you don't want to live them, then don't say you believe them.
Yeah, that's great. Good advice. All right. What's your next question for our next guest?
Well, I want to circle back to the one that the first question was, which is, how do you find meaning in life? But make sure they understand. You're not asking for like, well, I really like to set goals for myself, like I'm going to lose 10 pounds, or no, those are like little purposes. But how do you make sense of human existence, the fact that you exist?
It's great. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, hey, and this has been Common X. If technology can give us more time, the real question becomes, what kind of humans do we want to be with that? Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Owen Anderson.
I really enjoyed it. It's great. Like I said before, it's great to be around some other Xers. We need to stay together, because I think we've got the right amount of pessimism about the boomers, that they thought they were great and they were going to change the world, and they didn't. But the right amount of optimism also from the boomers, that hey guys, don't just give in to dystopian series. We can actually make the world better.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Well, and let's stay in touch, man. We'd love to have you back.
Anytime.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today to the podcast, Common X with Jared and Ian. We really appreciate you guys and would love your support. So make sure you click that subscribe or like button, or follow us on all our social media platforms and on YouTube and Spotify, because that would really help us out. And that helps us bring more episodes to you guys every week, and hopefully from content that you guys want to see. So reach out, TikTok, YouTube, leave comments. If there's anything that you guys want to see, or any guests that you want us to try and get on, let us know. We do have a good lineup coming. So thank you again. We love you guys. Thanks for your support. And we'll see you next time. And remember, common sense isn't that common. So that's why we're bringing common sense back from Generation X.